it's a pretty depressing ending, but I don't think it was intentional.
A goof, like, it's like some of these Jasons are like, eh,
Ramboing around.
there's a Jason, there's a Jason, here's a Jason,
Yep,
there's a Jason.
every decision.
I'm gonna take a lucky shot here.
I'm finally being good because I choose you.
The Council of Cucks. Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Sterling and I are talking about the finale of Dark Matter. So, spoilers ahead. And if you like what you see, just hit that thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so that we can stay up to date in your feed and turn on that bell for notifications. And with that, Sterling, let's talk about this family, what they're going through,
Yeah.
and the mansion that they're staying at.
They spent a lot of time on, in there and kind of like on those touching family moments of them figuring out like the scope of the problem, the ramifications of it, and like coming back together as a family. I thought that was definitely an interesting choice with this kind of like exciting climax that they're building towards.
Yeah, I did feel like for maybe a finale episode that felt a little slow at parts. It was very, there's all this tension built up of all these extra Jasons, and yet we're just kind of taking our time, chatting about things with the family and
Making pancakes.
bad
Yeah.
expired pancakes. So
That's actually what I meant when I said interesting, was not necessarily good interesting.
yeah, I felt like it took a lot of its time to, like, and I kind of get why they did it, right? They want to try to, like, show that this Jason got back with his family, he's reconnecting. It's like that satisfying part of it.
The thing though is, who actually knows if this is our Jason or not? Because we have seen Jasons that are wearing the same clothes. So,
And the same band.
and the same bands. The only reason that anybody knows for a fact that this is our Jason is because Blake Crouch said it in an interview. But there's plenty of people who don't read interviews about shows. They just watch shows and then they move on. And there's a portion of that audience that's going to say, I don't I don't know if this is my Jason or not.
Yeah.
And that's a very different ending.
I agree, but also, like, Daniela doesn't know if this is her Jason, but she's just like, this is the first good Jason. I'm sticking with this one.
That's the whole thing feels very arbitrary to me as far as Daniela's choice of accepting this Jason over all the other Jasons. Jason 2 choosing to help this Jason feels arbitrary, like he somehow knows that it's the Jason that we're rooting for.
Right. There was two Jasons
why?
scuffling, and he shoots one of
Yeah,
them.
and why should we be rooting for this Jason over? And well, I'll get into that with like some of these other Jasons, but it does feel very arbitrary at this point.
Yeah, and I also agree with how arbitrary it is to Charlie. Like, we haven't really experienced Charlie's view on what has been going on with this whole event. Like, we only saw Daniela having doubts that this was her Jason throughout the season, not really getting Charlie's perspective, not seeing how he feels. And then all of this happens, and Charlie is pretty okay with it. It doesn't seem like he's gonna have a lot of trauma after this, even though a 16-year-old boy should have trauma after this.
Yeah, I definitely think, especially like when they're in the car and they're getting all the messages from all the other Jasons, that to me is pretty horrifying. Jason Prime even confirmed it with Charlie when Charlie asked, are these other ones my dad? And Jason Prime said yes and no. And I think yes in terms of like technically they all are, but I guess maybe it comes down to which one Daniela chooses. Is I don't it still feels so arbitrary. That's messed up for a child to have to deal with all of this stuff and just accept it.
Yeah, and if the new rules set by the box that it just creates a new Jason for every decision that was made, then
Right.
technically all of these Jasons have like who's to even say that Jason Prime is the one that deserves to be with this Daniela? They've all gone through
What
the
I'm
same
saying,
exact experience.
they are all, because they, according to what the show said, and who knows, maybe they're wrong about it. Like maybe somebody just kind of misspoke. But according to what the show said, the box is spawning Jasons, not Jasons are coming from other worlds that are very similar and are, it's like the box is spawning Jasons. So they decisions are splitting the Jasons but not creating new world. Every single one of these Jasons, other than Jason 2,
Came from this world.
are, yes, they are Charlie's dad and they are Daniela's husband, and they all have equal claim. I would the only point I would argue is that, and actually this is even a tough. I was gonna say the only thing I would argue is like any of the ones that are Ramboing around
The Rambo Jasons.
maybe maybe aren't deserving of it, but then you have to realize that they are damaged goods which cause that. And so there's a good reason to want to rehabilitate them and find out like what led to such terrible trauma. So it's tough.
But what's crazy is all of these Jasons are the same Jason that came from the same teaching background. Like this was like a boring dad Jason. Like the fact that he could
Yes.
even be in this box and turn into Rambo Jason, like that
Yes.
it doesn't quite like to me it would seem like if Jasons were getting through this box making the same decision, they're still trying to get that same goal of getting home. So I would think that most of these Jasons would be like our Jason that are like sympathetic,
Mm-hmm.
caring, just kind of like smart but not, action fighter.
Yeah, I think so. For me, that part really doesn't make sense because I get the whole Breaking Bad type idea that anybody given the, like you can always have terrible choices to make, and over a long enough time make incrementally worse choices that like eventually lead you from somebody that is an outstanding citizen to somebody that is a terrible person. But Breaking Bad had time on its advantage, which I think made that believable. This apparently these Jasons have turned into Rambos over the period of what is it? It's like 29 or 39 days.
Like a month.
In the span
Like
of 1 month,
right.
they are they are literally murderers.
Yeah, and I just like whatever they had to go through in the box, like yes, maybe some of them like the we see the one of the biggest Rambo ones who dug the grave, who lost an Amanda to a tree branch of all things. Like
Right.
not a militia or anything, like just
Yeah.
nature. And he's just like, well,
And
now
had to
I'm.
watch her die slowly over 2 days.
Which why didn't he just kill her then? At that point, if he's
I
watching
think
her,
he probably hoped that she would make it, so I think he was, who knows.
but even still, like, how does that turn you into
Yep.
John Rambo? You know,
Like I said, over the course of 30, Breaking Bad took a lot of time to do that. And it was always like incremental things because you don't just snap and turn into, I mean, unless something truly psychologically breaks you, you don't generally turn on a dime.
and I guess you could make the argument they have talked about the box is the way that it affects people is their mental states. It is it can be damaging for long periods of time. You have to seek counseling through these things to like manage your emotions and conditions through these. So like you could make the argument that seeing all these things, but like it never happened to Jason.
It still feels questionable after, once again, like 30 days, but who knows? Maybe. It was interesting seeing all of them on the chat board. That was definitely an interesting device to introduce you to like the quantity of Jasons.
The Council of
Um,
Jasons.
the Council of Jasons. To me, it's still one of the issues I have with this show is that I feel like it will make a rule in order to do something cool, but then not think through the ramifications and follow that all the way to like the logical conclusion. So Don and I talked last week about like the fact that, there should be a bunch of Jason 2s, maybe Ryans, maybe Laytons also running around. It shouldn't just be Jason 1s. But I think kind of another example of having this interesting idea and then not thinking through the ramifications of it. When he got DM'd by 3 Jasons, one of them was a very low Jason number, like Jason 5 or something like that. So it must have been very early on, entering that chat board. And to me, if this was happening, that Jasons were reaching out to new Jasons and saying, hey, you want to team up and take out these other Jasons? By the time our Jason joined the chat board, he was like 80 or something like that. This would have happened a number of times, and these other Jasons that were doing this would have seen other Jasons doing it with them, and therefore they'd realize that's not a smart plan. I've got to do something else, and that wouldn't still be happening. Like at this point, that pattern would have changed, and to me, it just felt like an interesting device it was like, oh, this would be really cool, but then not thought through of like, but would that really happen? Like right now, would that happen?
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. There was even just thinking about like these Jasons all coming to terms with all these other Jasons existing. All of these other Jasons have the exact right to be with this Daniela because this is their Daniela. They're not coming from other worlds. And they're just all communicating. Like they all just start this chat board, and like there's so many of them. Like I don't know if you're reading the chats. They're very like.
That's where I got Rambo from.
Well, that's where I got Rambo from too, but they're just talking about these like they say something and they're like, "Was that you? Oh, the guy like passed out, and that's coincident, like." And they're all kind of just having like a goof. Like it's like some of these Jasons are like, I don't really need Danielle and Charlie anymore. I got my friends Jasons. We got this whole community now, and
yeah,
I don't know. It just they were being a little too friendly on the message board, and I just there's a lot of problems with all these Jasons, I feel.
Yeah, and the fact that some of the ideas that they came up with just seem laughable. I think for me, like the split custody was probably the worst of them, because split custody means that all of them are accepting that they're going to continue to live in this world somehow. Like they need gainful employment,
right?
And there's gonna be, and they're gonna need housing, and there's however many of that, like that certainly seems like the kind of thing that you might kick around, but as a really smart person, you'd want to kick around in your head before you said it and sounded dumb.
Yeah, and our alleged Jason said that there were hundreds of them. So is it like we get to hang out with Daniela one day a year? Like that's the split custody? And is this
right?
Is this world completely screwed over because like are Jasons gonna just keep trickling in to a point where there's like thousands of Jasons that just
I think that some Jasons will take longer rests to like recover. There are some Jasons out there that must have gotten injured in their world, or in not like in a world, and injured badly enough that they are in the hospital for 3 months before they can start hopping through worlds again. And those Jasons are going to be trickling in, Yeah. 1 month delayed Jasons, 2 month delayed Jasons, 3 month delayed Jasons. Like, it's going to happen.
And you think about, like, of all these Jasons going through, like, it's for every decision they could have made. So, like, it's...
every decision.
Which also spawns off every other decision. So, like, instant beginning decision creates a new Jason that creates a new Jason that creates like it just sounds like there's going to be infinite Jasons all coming to this
infinite,
which this world is destroyed. So like
it's effed. Yeah,
our family unit is going back in the box to travel the world or travel the universe, multiverse, whatever, and Jasons are just going to keep popping out here. Like they're just going to rule this world. They're just going to I don't know, like What is the game plan there? What do you do with all those Jasons?
Right. I mean, they're not going to be able. There's not going to be a structure to support them. So like there won't be enough jobs for and food for infinite Jasons. And so I think most are going to fall to starvation.
Well, and then I feel like other people are going to start figuring out in this world that Jasons are
Clear,
coming out.
yes.
So, do all these people are they going to start learning that there's a box that creates infinite universes that they can all start traveling through? There's a
Right.
lot of things to ask about these questions that
Lot.
don't really add up.
It does raise more questions than it answers. I think here's one of the beautiful things that you do. Rather than trying to explain things and have like complex rules for fun purposes, just make one very simple rule and stick with it, and you can have a great show. Quantum Leap, Sliders, those shows didn't even try and explain it. It's just like here's what the rule is. It's like Quantum Leap, he's jumping into bodies and can't leave until he resolves something from the past, and something machine. Like they don't try and explain it,
Right.
which is good because I mean, if you think too much about it, it's like how would a machine determine if he's doing something good in the past? So it's good that they didn't even try and explain it.
Yeah.
Great show. Like Sliders, did the whole multiverse thing, and it was great. It's just like they can go to different worlds. That's it. That's the rule.
That's yeah, but then going to different worlds and then now we have million Jasons, which also if you think about Jason 2's world, right? And we had Blair go through, we had those other two pilots go through, we had Jason, we had Layton. So, all of them going through, all of their decisions should be creating more of them.
Yes.
And there should be some of those that made it back to Jason 2's world. Like in 14 months, you would think that they would
Yes.
make the correct decisions to get there. And there should be, like, once somebody starts going in the box, wherever they go in the box trying to get back to where they came from, like, even if they don't try to get back to where they came from, there is a version of them that is trying to get back to where they came from. And so there's infinite of them coming through there. So, like, as soon as the box is created, infinite of everything should be coming out of the box backwards again, based on
Yes.
this new rule.
Yes.
This is a terrible rule to add.
It's a terrible rule to add. It was added because it was gonna add the one really cool thing of what if the final boss isn't the one bad Jason 2, but instead, you know, hundreds of Jason 1s that have gone through such terrible things that they've become, the big baddie. And it's like, yeah, that's a really cool idea, but what are the consequences of that rule? We got to think that through because otherwise it just doesn't make sense.
I like that several episodes ago we predicted like a Scooby-Doo, like them coming through the door and the boxes of all these different realities. But nope, just turned
Yes.
out it's basically Scooby-Doo in the basics of just every Jason coming out of every corner. It's oh, there's a Jason, there's a Jason, here's a Jason,
Yeah.
there's a Jason. It's too many Jasons.
Way too many Jasons. Speaking of which, Jason 2, what were your thoughts on him? Other than the fact that he also should have a bunch of Jason 2s that think that they're the right one to have stolen this family.
Well, I could almost give a pass to the Jason 2 logic there of like, there's so many multiverses that like I would just assume that a bunch of Jason 2s are fucking up a bunch of Jason 1's lives in other places.
But here's the way that I look at this. Like every time that Jason 2 has gone in the box for, I'm not talking about like before he found this world.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
After he found this world and he decided to like ditch Ryan, and then he decided to get another Ryan to replace him, and then he brought Layton out a few times to train Layton. He made multiple decisions during that time, and every single one of those should have spawned another Jason 2 who is great at getting exactly where he wants. He always gets back to his like Jason 1's world, right? So all of those Jason 2s should all come back to Jason 1's world and think that they are the Jason 2 that deserves to have stolen this family.
When you put it like that, you're right. There should be a ton of Jason 2s, so that doesn't make sense.
At all.
I mean, I've got nothing on that one because you're right. There should be countless Jason 2s. There should have been countless Jason 2s coming back to his original world. You know, he was like, "Oh, I'm unsuccessful. I came back." You know, there.
Yep.
That is
Yes.
a huge glaring hole. Okay, maybe you figured out why. Do you understand?
Every time you make a decision, it causes you to split. Like, Blair's been through a lot. Shouldn't there have been? Are you talking like Blair made many decisions, which means there should be many Blairs. Not one of them was successful in getting back. Every single Blair had some terrible thing happen to them. Same thing with the other two people that went through that we never found out who the hell they were. Every decision they made, like, unless they died right away, every decision they made should have made a bunch of them. And you're telling me that not one of them, it just,
I know that's what I'm saying. Like, and especially for 14 months, because you would think that because
especially
the multiverse,
for 14 months.
yeah,
I forgot how long it was.
right, and because it's the multiverse, and because every choice is a thing, there would be the correct amount of choices to be like, oh, I made all the right choices to get back to where I needed to go. Yeah. Why is that a thing? Okay, maybe you know this. Okay. Why did Jason 2's motivation change all of a sudden?
I mean, I think I know what the author was attempting to do. I don't know if I buy it. It seemed like he switched when he was tied up and he finally found out the damage he caused, and he heard that, you know, he tells Jason, when Jason asks him, you know, why did you do this? And he's like, I really thought that you would like my life. And he sees that that's not true. And then he finds out that his decisions led to his Daniela dying, his Ryan dying, and then that Jason having to watch his Amanda suffer for 2 days before dying. And I think that that was what finally made him, because Amanda did tell us that Jason 2 was I think she said good, or at least something like, she definitely made it seem like he wasn't a bad guy. He might be, you know, selfish, but he's not like a bad person, and he would have had to rationalize the decision of stealing this Jason. So that's what
seemed like
the show tried to show, but I don't think that would make sense.
But then we also saw him just kind of be a sociopath with Danielle and Charlie, and then you're like, oh, I guess he really learned. Like, he's out there killing Jasons, and he wasn't like remorseful. It was just like this one Jason tells him the bad story of all the things that happened, and he's just like, you're right, I failed.
How is it? So I think it was supposed to be a redemption arc for him, right? Because he, like, I'm not saying I believe it was right. I think it was supposed to be written as redemption arc because he saved the Jason that we cared about. I didn't really, whatever, the Jason we were following from the beginning. But to me, that is such an arbitrary choice because they are all the Jason that he fucked over. Every single one of them is the Jason he abducted, and he made every single one of their lives worse for it. So when he kills one Jason to arbitrarily choose to save another Jason, that isn't, he just killed a person whose life he already made worse. He should, like, if anything, that Jason that is about to be a murderer, if not, no, that Jason killed people, I think. That Jason that had become a murderer that he killed, that one is possibly more deserving of him working to try and fix what he did, because he seriously fucked that one over. Like,
yeah,
it's just so arbitrary to be like, I'm finally being good because I choose you, but literally all of the other hundreds of Jasons that he equally wronged he just ignores.
Yeah, well, and the annoying thing about that choice too, the Jason that he kills, there's two Jasons wrestling on the ground. They were like, how did he know? He was like, you know, I'm gonna take a lucky shot here. Hopefully the Jason I shoot is the one that's killed a bunch of Jasons, and the Jason I don't shoot is the good Jason. Like, that's
right.
They're two Jasons wrestling on the ground. How do you know?
Two, yes, exactly.
And
It's so arbitrary. It doesn't make sense. It makes zero sense.
there's still more problems to this, right? Like this whole Jason 2 even getting to this mansion, right? We see Blair having a gun pointed at one Jason, other Jason tied up, and we never see Blair again. Did Jason 2 kill her to get the phone? Because she wasn't giving it up. Like, she was
Right.
very disturbed by what was happening. So, did
Yeah.
Jason 2 kill her to get the tracker? Or to get the...
I don't know. That whole scene made no sense to me. Both Jason 2 and Blair in that scene. So Blair enters in the house and sees duct tape by like post
And blood.
and blood on the floor and doesn't call the police and goes upstairs. Okay, that is just so dumb. One.
Okay, I think you're gonna say the thing that I think is dumb.
And then two, what the hell was Jason 2's plan hiding upstairs? Because any sane person should have called the police as soon as they saw the blood, so most people wouldn't have gone up so that he could then capture them. Like that why is he waiting up there? Shouldn't he be like behind the front door and as soon as it closes then he's like
I got you.
I need your phone for the local like I don't understand what his plan was.
I mean, I also don't understand why Blair, when she's running and the gunshot goes off, she just stops. Like, she was like right at the top of the stairs. Like, she could have pivoted that corner. She could have been down faster than him. The chances of her getting shot, I feel like, would have been low. But she just instantly stops. He shoots in the air. She instantly, oh God.
Right.
Oh, what do? The motivations of some of these characters just don't make sense. How is this getting an 80%?
Their motivation is to move a very particular storyline forward. That is what every single person's motivation is like. I need plot point X to happen. What can I do to make plot point X happen?
Yeah, it feels like this was, no offense, but it just feels like maybe like some kindergartners wrote this and they just said like, I need this to happen, so this is gonna happen. And rules, ramifications, nobody's gonna think that hard about it. Just, this is what happens. I don't know. It's rough.
I think that I think you can pull apart any show and movie. I think some of them are less prone to being pulled apart than others. But I think that there are two defenses that you have against people like you and me just picking apart every thread. And defense number one is to look at your work critically, from the perspective of somebody like I watched an interview with somebody and they said that they were with like a director and they said that they were thinking of cinema sins when they made their movie because they didn't want to be on that YouTube series or they wanted to have like the minimal amount of sins, and so like that's one thing you could do is write a better script and think from that perspective of like what are potential plot holes rather than letting somebody else find it. The other thing is make something more engaging because then I think people will overlook that stuff because it's kind of like magic, like they're so focused elsewhere that they're not focused on that. And something I thought was kind of surprising here was I feel like there should have been emotional moments in this show, like especially in Pandemic World.
Yeah.
I did not well up once. Don and I are watching a really, really silly comedy, Resident Alien with Alan Tudyk.
Yep.
And very, very silly show, 30-minute episodes, and it's getting me to well up a lot.
That's the thing. Like, if you build solid characters, you can make them feel emotional. But we went 9 episodes of the same, like, we didn't we didn't build up the characters. Maybe the most build up was Amanda and Jason 1 and Amanda leaving Jason 1 and the ramifications of him doing it alone was a kind of emotional beat. I mean, it didn't like hit me either.
It didn't exactly. It didn't get me to It was emotional.
Yeah.
I could tell that it was sad for them, but it
But
wasn't sad for me.
right, it was like we saw Amanda run out into the snow almost getting herself killed, making a foolish move. We saw, them making foolish moves on the way, meeting Blair, and it doesn't seem like they built up that relationship enough to make that hurt as much. Same with everything with Daniela and Charlie and Max. Like when he sees Max, right? For the first time, he's never seen Max before, and he's like crying that he loves him so much. It's like, well, Max wasn't even a part of the story until episode 4. So why would I care that you're sad about this character that we didn't even know about? It's very hard to have that feeling of connection to these characters.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I do like many of the ideas from the show, but it just doesn't. The execution falls far short. The budget on this show seems like more like the budget of Silo than Foundation, which to me doesn't make sense if you want to do a multiverse story. Like I think I would have loved Foundation style visuals in this, just really truly beautiful things, have it feel more epic in scope. This actually felt like a pretty small set show.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they had well, because a lot of the sets were reused. We were in Velocity Labs, their house, the box, which is not a lot there. So yeah, it is. It feels smaller. And when they would go to like Crumbly World or Underwater World, it was all like CGI. So like not new and expansive sets.
And I don't feel like you would get the one shot of Crumbly World or Aurora Borealis World, but then after that, like once you're actually in the world, they'd be pretty tight shots, where it clearly could be just a set that looks like it's outside.
Right.
So it didn't seem like it had the budget for what I think a show like this, what I would want a show like this to be.
Yeah. I agree. Okay, I think that this brings us to this episode as a finale, the final thing that we saw of how it ended. And what are your thoughts?
Okay, so I definitely think that they've left the door open for season 2. So I don't think that the book has anything more written than this, but I do think that there is room for a season 2. And actually, I even think, and not that I necessarily want this, but I actually think that they have room, like plenty of room for spin-offs based off of like the doors they've opened, if you will.
I was thinking the same thing, actually. Like,
okay, what spin-off would you want to see?
Okay, so I feel like there could be a spin-off of... Okay, first off, I think they could do a cool second season of,
okay,
just drop all the baggage of the first season. Let's just make these 3 that are just traveling the multiverse, trying to find places to live. And then, it could be episodic. They, like, come to this one reality where it looks good. Like, it looks like a good place. Then something's disrupted. They have to go back to the box. They have to find a new reality. You can even have like Jason 2 pop in to cause havoc, or Jason 1 that is still looking for Daniela and Charlie. Like, that could be a cool second season. Spin-offs?
Episodic would be a pretty big change.
I agree.
And I feel like that's not as trendy right now. I think that was like a lot of the shows I mentioned, like Quantum Leap and Sliders, were episodic. They were phenomenal. I feel like a lot of TV has moved away from that, and there's almost an obligation to tell a whole story. So I think that would... I'm not saying I would be against it.
Right.
I think that would be a big pill to swallow for returning audiences.
Yeah, so I feel like that's not going to happen.
Okay.
I could see a spin-off of the Jason 1 world where they like... There's this
Oh,
military.
think about that.
Yeah,
All the ramifications of like thousands of Jasons and like what that does to this world.
yeah, and that like and it's from the like the world's perspective, right? So like the say the government,
Yeah.
the whatever, they're all like there's this random guy that just keeps popping up, and they're all kind of like there's infinite of them, so there's infinite versions of these Rambo version ones. So like we gotta fight these guys, but these guys are smart. They're cunning, and I think that could be a cool spinoff.
Did you think this through?
What do you mean?
Like, did you think about that ahead of time? Because that's a
Yeah,
damn good idea.
no, I did think about that because I thought I was
Didn't I
so
really didn't put
curious.
much I didn't put much thought into it. So all I thought was like I felt like steampunk Leighton would be like the most interesting to have a spin-off with.
Oh, that
Because
would.
he seemed to be living his best life, wearing some funky clothes and just visiting cool worlds. And I think that one would be 100% episodic. And
Yeah.
I think that would make sense for that, like but
Well,
yours is solid.
so I came up with this thought because when at the very end, when they're like getting into the box, and there's, in my opinion, the Council of Cucks that have decided. They said, you know what? My life isn't important. Your life is important. Take care of them. But let me just say goodbye. And they all of them that showed up there agreed on this. And so I was like wondering, like, there's gonna be all
Yeah.
these Jasons that have these different
There would be
views.
factions. Like
Yeah.
yeah, there'd be like yeah, there'd be like those Jasons that try and help the world from this like infestation of Rambos.
And
Oh,
they're like, we're
yeah.
thinking like these Jasons. So like, if a bunch of Jasons got together and they had this plan, this is be the best way to thwart it. Like yeah, I'm invested in these Jasons. Like I don't like the rule that
Yeah.
got them there, but I want to
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what these Jasons are gonna do afterwards.
Man, that is. I mean, at some point, I think at some point soon, I think somebody would reseal the box. That would like, it would have to happen.
Yeah.
The question is like whether or not there's some
Or destroy the box.
great unless there's like some disturbed Jason that rather than going Rambo, just like straight up cracked and is maybe more along the lines of like Joker, and that
Ooh.
one continues to do things like breaking the box back open so more Jasons can go through and yeah.
Huh. Or if all these
There's
boxes,
there's definitely potential for this.
there really is. What did you think about the Ryan and Amanda scene?
We got way off.
We did.
You know that like I had one random kind of very off topic question, not technically about the show, but rather like what spin-off. I think my thoughts on the Ryan and Amanda thing. What do you think I think?
I think that you think that one, it's bullshit, and two, why does
Bullshit.
Ryan know who Amanda is? Why would he be looking for Amanda? That Ryan has no connection to Amanda.
I don't know. I just I called that and I said that I was and then I stopped talking about it too much because I was like, you know what, it hasn't happened yet. I can't complain about them doing something they haven't done yet. So I stopped. But yeah, that it just doesn't make sense. Like so if who you have with you has that big of an impact on where you end up, Amanda says that she is what is preventing Jason from coming back to his world. So how does how do Amanda and Jason 2 somehow in an infinite universe dream up the exact same world? And so Ryan ends up it's so frustratingly written just for the sake of an interesting plot point.
Well, and here was another interesting plot point that was just written for the sake of an interesting plot point. Jason 1 takes the ampules and leaves them in Amanda's bag so that he has less tries to get to his real world. And then we just see that Ryan comes up with the solution. He literally is like, "Oh, it turned purple. I did it. I made the ampules." And then he's looking for Amanda. That makes no sense.
Yeah,
How would he
it's
know?
the what I think is kind of interesting about the ending of this show is I was talking to Dawn about it, and I know it's not like a happy ending because they're, Jason Prime and his family can't stay here, so they do have to be rehomed. So it's definitely not a perfect ending, and there are plenty of Jasons that get screwed. But in the end, Jason Prime does have the hero's journey, and he does kind of get what he deserves ish, as long as you ignore that all of them actually deserve that. So him getting it is robbing the others of it. The I guess so she was I was saying like it's like a bittersweet ending is what it's supposed to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like everything's not perfect, but Jason did get what is most important to him. And Don's like, "Okay, I can see that." And I was like, "But it's not that." I was like, "Harry Potter is a bittersweet ending. A lot of terrible stuff happen, a lot of people die, but the world is at least a better place for it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we can at least say that good triumphed.
Yeah.
Every single one of these Jasons has equal claim to Daniela, so I don't see it as like an overall win. I don't see it as like an overall plus. I see it as a net negative. It's a pretty depressing ending, but I don't think it was intentional.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think hard about it, Jason 1, Danielle, and Charlie had other friends and family in this world that are all abandoned now. Like
No, worse than abandoned.
their
Well,
world is overrun by
their
Jasons.
their world is fucked. I think, especially once you write that TV show,
Yeah.
their 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 world is done.
I yeah, it does seem like nothing other than the main Jason, who we don't even know is the main Jason. He got back with that Daniela and Charlie. Hopefully
Yeah,
it works out.
yeah, and I think like you can argue that is definitely the Jason that we saw in the beginning because once again the author Blake Crouch did say in an interview that was the Jason we were following from the beginning. But that's not how art works. When you make art, you can have whatever interpretation you have in your head, but as soon as you release it, any interpretation that anybody has is 100% valid. That is their experience of your work. And once again, like most people don't even read these things. So I think anybody that believes that it is not the Jason or at least even has doubts about it, they are completely fair for believing that or having those doubts.
Yeah. I mean, it's the most compassionate Jason. Is it our Jason that we followed? We saw a Jason that flirted with the idea of possibly kidnapping a Jason.
Right, right.
But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you, folks, so much for joining us through Dark Matter. Come back next week for the next show that we will be doing, which is currently a mystery. So come back next week for the surprise of what our next show is going to be. I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.